What's up everyone, it's Austin here from Make Pop Music and Austin Hall Audio, and today I'm going to show you how to take a boring chord progression like this and transform it into something a little bit more interesting like this. What's up everyone, Austin here, and we are back with another video. For the video today, I wanted to look at taking a chord progression in its most simple kind of basic form and expanding on that with things like changing voicings, changing inversions, doing things like adding extra notes to kind of extend that chord, splitting that chord into rhythmic elements. So by the end of this video today, you should be able to kind of understand how to take a super basic chord progression, honestly in its most basic form, and kind of expand on that and do things to experiment. So by the end, you get something that feels a little bit more unique, something that's got some flavor, and something that's going to kind of entertain your listener a little bit more than maybe the basic chord progression that you started with. So we're going to go over a lot. We're about to hop into Cubase and check all that out. But before we do, if you like this video today, please make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. That helps us out a ton. And if you want to support the channel, after the video, you can head over to makepopmusic.com and check out all of our free and paid content over there. Tons of goodies over there, so go check that out after the video. But let's hop into Cubase so I can show you how to expand on these boring chord progressions. All right, we're in Cubase. I'm going to be using Easy Keys for a lot of this because it has a detector that'll show you exactly what I'm playing, so it's going to kind of help out. For this video today, we're going to be working in C major, and we're going to be doing that because C major basically just contains all of the white keys on a keyboard. So if you're an absolute beginner, writing in C major so you can kind of make sure that you're not accidentally falling out of your scale tends to be a really cool tip, and then you can always transpose that up later if you want it, to go up to, something like G major or go down to like F major. You can always kind of change that. So for today, we're going to be working in C major, and that contains these notes: C, D, E, F, G, A, B. And then it restarts at C. So basically every single scale that you'll ever see is going to have what it's called 7 notes. So in a C major, since we just kind of showed what those keys are, you're going to have C is your 1, D is your 2, E is your 3, F is your 4, G is your 5, A is your 6, B is your 7. So, and then it restarts at 1. So when you hear things like a 1, 5, 6, 4 chord, that would be chords that are containing, it's going to be a C chord, G chord, A chord, and F chord. And since these are falling in scale, you're going to have, if on Easy Keys it's just saying C, that's just your basic C major chord. So I know that since we're contained within all of the white keys for this specific video, we're going to be working with a C major, a G major. This is an A minor. This is because if you were to follow the major progression, it would be that, but that little C sharp falls out of the scale, so it's going to be, and then we're going to go down to F, and that's just F, A, C. So that's going to be the basic chord progression, and again, this is just a 1, 5, 6, 4. And you can see it right here. I'll open up this piano roll. So we've got right here, the C chord is just a C, an E, and a G. The G chord is just a G, a B, and a D. The A chord is just an A, a C, and an E, and then the F is just F, A, and C. Again, this is like the most basic chord structure you can ever think. It's just this is called a triad. And that's kind of where most chords will start, at least in their most basic form. So now that we've looked at that, one thing that you can do, especially if you're in Cubase or any kind of DAW that has Scale Assistant, is you can turn on something like a scale editor, so I can say that I'm in C major, and I can snap this pitch. So as we experiment today, if I take a note up or down, it's only going to fall within the scale. So if I turn this off, like let's go right here, you see that we still have that D sharp, but I'm just going to turn this on so we don't accidentally fall out of scale. And there you go. So there's our most basic chord progression. Played all the way through, sounds a little bit something like this. And the first thing that I like to do when I'm trying to spice up a chord progression is I'll do something called adding extensions. So again, that was the chords in their most basic form. So for instance, here's a C major. It's just your C, E, and G. Let's say we want to spice that up. What you can do is you can add extra notes. So we could still do C, E, and G. But now to spice it up, let's add that B, because that falls in the scale. And this is going to give you a chord called a major 7. I'm a big fan of 7th chords, so C major 7 is basically just that C major chord that we played earlier with that B added on top. You could also do something where you add something like an A on top. That's going to give you a C dominant 6. You can do something where you add the kind of F. And all of these are still falling within that scale. So what you can do is you can just add different notes on top of your basic chord. So if we go up to the, let's go up to the A minor. We can add that G up top, and that's going to give us a minor 7. Still 100% in the scale. That's going to be a G dominant 7, F major 7, E minor 7, D minor 7, C major 7, and that's just adding that extra note up top. And again, you can do 7ths, you could do something called a 9th, which is going to be where you would go up to, basically what you would do is, remember how I said C restarts at the top? You would just go up one note from that. So you're going to add that D, since that's going to be the second note within a C major. You can add an 11th, which is going to go up to the 4th. So there's all kinds of different extensions that you can do, and each one is going to give it a certain different flavor. And I find that this tends to be a really, really, really nice way to kind of add texture. And especially if you're going for something that doesn't fall within just like the super kind of standard bubblegum pop realm. So we've taken that C major chord and we've added a B up top. We've taken that G major chord and we've added an F up top. We've taken that A minor chord and we've added a G up top. And then we have taken this F major and we've added that E. And that's going to give us different 7th chords. So let's take a look as we play it and listen to how different this sounds. So already, just by adding one extra note to each chord, you're just getting a totally different flavor. And again, especially if you have Scale Assistant on, you can kind of take these, drag these around however you want, and you can get really weird with it, and it's just going to give you all these different kind of textures of chord. Some will sound better than others, some will work, some won't work. It's all just kind of about experimenting, especially if you don't have that music theory. The main thing you want to do is make sure that you're sticking within the keys that fall in that scale. So you should, no matter how little theory you know, you should always kind of know at least what scale you're creating in, and you should know what actual notes will fall within that scale. And then after that, it's really just about experimenting. So we talked a little bit about extensions. You can also use kind of like alternate chords, and these are going to be things like, instead of doing, let me pull this back up. So instead of doing something like a C major, you could do a sus4. So what you would do for that is you would take that E in a C major and turn it up to an F. So you'd go from to. You could also do a sus2. So what you would do is, instead of playing that E, you would go to a D. And these are all technically still C chords, but each one feels so much different. So let's say you do like a sus2, and then a sus4, and then just a major, and then a 7th. They're all still C chords, but since you're playing some of those alternates, you're getting such a different vibe and texture. So for this example, what we've done is we've made some sus2 and some sus4 chords. And again, if you want to get more music theory, you can find whole videos that will explain exactly what each of these are. But this is really just all coming from trial and error, and then you're using something like Easy Keys or Scale Assistant or whatever to kind of tell you what chords you might accidentally be playing within that scale. So C sus2, G sus2, A sus4, F major 7. So I'm still keeping that F major 7 to kind of ground it. You don't have to. You could definitely do something like this. But I like the major 7. Again, as long as everything's kind of falling within that scale you're working in, you can get as weird as you want. So let's listen to how different already this sounds. I'll play the most basic one that we started with. Here we go. Let's go to the chord extensions. So sevenths. There you go. Minor 7. Major 7. Let's go to the sus chords. There you go. So you can see that whether you're playing a 7th, whether you're playing a 9th, whether you're playing a sus chord, those all have really different timbres and emotions. And that to me is one thing that you can do. So, you know, if you say that you know that you have a 1, 5, 6, 4, you know that's going to be a C, you know that's going to be a G, you know that's going to be an A, you know that's going to be an F. But that doesn't mean that each of those just has to be a super basic triad. Go crazy with it, add different extensions, add different alternate chords, and then once you have the chords as you like, what you can do is you can do something called changing voices. So what that is you're kind of creating these inversions, and this is not changing the chord because you're keeping the exact same notes, but what you're doing is you're rearranging them. So, like for instance, a C sus2 is always going to be a C, a D, and a G. It's always going to be a sus2. So what you could do is you could take the C up an octave. It's still the same exact chord, but it's going to feel a little bit different. That's the same chord, but listen to how much different it feels like this rather than like this. So sometimes what you might want to do is play around with different voicings because that can give you totally different feelings and textures, and it's really good for if you like to kind of write where your top note kind of has a melody within itself. So let's do it like this. So these are all the same chords that we just played around with in that sus2 and sus4 example, but changing some of these into different inversions just creates an illusion that they feel a little bit different because we're kind of pedaling on this D note right here as the top note. So even though these chords kind of fall outside of that, you're still kind of getting that consistency through the D kind of remaining on top until the very end. And to me, doing something like that kind of creates this feeling of like tension because your ear is perceiving that note that sits on top for most of that time. So it's like, it's hanging on to that D, and then at the end it feels like it kind of resolves when it goes up to that E for the F major 7. So doing something like changing your kind of chord structures and your voicings and doing those inversions can be a huge, huge, huge way to just add a little bit of extra spice. So for example, these are the same exact chords that we've played before in this. I'll kind of show you. But while changing the voicing, you get a totally, totally different vibe. We're going back to the major, to like the 7th example, by the way. So let's look at that compared to something like this. You can see that when we change these voicings, what we're doing is we're kind of creating clusters in a different area. So you can see right here, you see how big of a jump this is from our first chord to our second chord? But when we change that voicing, we're kind of clustering these so it feels a lot closer. And that in turn will kind of give you a much, much, much different emotive feel. So doing things like just swapping around, you're keeping the same note, but swapping around where that note is sitting within that chord progression can really, really change the vibe. Because like to me, with having like that B and that C dissonant note right on each other and that E and that F dissonant note right on each other, this is starting to feel much more like kind of a neo-soul interpretation rather than just feeling like kind of a pop chord progression with just some extra notes on top. Versus so once you have the chords that you definitely want to use, whether that's just your traditional kind of major triad, you're going to do an add 7th, an add 9th, a sus2, a sus4, a dominant chord. Those don't really matter. Just find something that you feel like works for you and works for the song. And then once you have those, go in and swap the actual structure of where those notes are, just to see if you like any other kind of voicings or inversions a little bit different. The next thing that you can do is you can start to kind of add your root notes. And so what you'll do for this is, It depends. Like if you want to add your root note that's going to be following that chord progression, which is what we did for this example, I know that I'm playing a C chord, a G chord, an A chord, and an F chord. So what I've done is I've just layered these under the bottom right here. So you can remove certain notes in other areas just to kind of keep those chords and those voicings and those inversions feeling a little bit different. So now that we've got this G in this root note, we don't necessarily have to have it here. Now that we've got this A in this root note, we don't have to have it here. And now that we've got this F in that root note, we don't have to have it on top. So again, and this is kind of doing the opposite to what that last example did, where when we clustered it together, it felt kind of super neo-soul, super jazz-esque, because all those note clusters felt kind of dissonant and next to each other, where this is starting to spread them out a little bit more. So even if we take that first C away, hear how kind of open these chords sound because they're covering like 2 or 3 octaves at this point. So adding those root notes underneath is a big way that you can kind of open up that scale rather than just having your voicings be these inversions that are super tight clusters. And then once you've kind of added your root notes below, what you can do is you can start to go in and chop up rhythms. So I've kept the root notes as just these big, long, kind of 1-bar chords. And then what I've done is I've gone through and I've chopped up each of these different chords into just kind of having a rhythm. So here's an example. And I find that this is really easy to do at this point because you have your chords kind of set and determined. You have your kind of voicings and inversions set and determined. So now what I want to do is I want to find the basic rhythm of how those are going to work. And then once you've chopped that up, I mean, you can kind of drag these wherever you want. You can make these 1/8 notes, you can make this much more simple. It doesn't really matter. It's really just about finding something that's going to fit the vibe of your song. But I like adding a little bit of rhythm into my keys, just especially if that's going to be the vibe for the song. And then what I'll do is once I've added that rhythm, this is where I'll go in and I'll start kind of breaking the chords apart. So for example, I'm going to keep this C major 7 right here, but then for the last little hit, I'm going to take that C into a D. So technically it's a new chord. However, it just feels like we're almost adding a little bit of a top melody. So I can pull up easy key so you can see technically what chords are playing. But keep in mind that structure-wise, these are going to be classified as the same exact chords that we've had. You're just changing some of these different top elements right here to have a little bit of a melody built in now. And that's not really requiring anything else other than just deleting a note here or there or dragging, you know, the last note somewhere else. And this to me is where you start to really get something that feels interesting and different, because this is not just a C major 7 played through. This is not just an F played through. This is not just, you know, everything starts to feel a little bit more special because you've kind of got a melody built in now, right? And then once you've done all of that, what you can do is you can start breaking up these elements into different sounds. And so what I'll do is now that I've got some rhythm, I've got a little bit of a top melody with that, you know, these kind of end notes fluctuating and not just falling right inside the standard chord progression. I've got a bass below. What I'll do is I'll start splitting that up. So, you know, I'll copy and paste the MIDI from the low end, and I'll put that on a bass patch. And then what I'll do is I might take those like plucky kind of keys, put that on a patch. And then I might take those chords and I might just extend them so I can have a pad patch. So I'm still going to keep those little note alterations where we have those little top melodies kind of split the chord. But you don't really have to create anything new. You're really just taking the same MIDI and you're just extending it. And then when you put all three together, it's literally nothing different than what we already have. We've just divided that into sounds that kind of work for each different element. So that instead of being something like this. Nothing new has been added, but it just goes to show that once you have your chord progression, finding different sounds to kind of fit what that element is doing can be huge. So finding a bass sound that's going to fit a long drawn out bass, finding a pluck sound that's going to fit those kind of like syncopated plucks, and then maybe finding some kind of big chord pad that you can stick underneath to kind of tie them both together is kind of a go-to technique for me. And at the end, you get something so completely different from what we started with. So here's what we started with, our most basic 1-5-6-4 progression in C major. And then we're keeping it a 1-5-6-4, but now we've added extensions, we've added inversions, we've added different kind of like sus chords, we've added melodies on top, we've added bass below, and you get something like this. And again, none of this really requires much music theory beyond know what scale or what key you're playing in and know what notes fall within that. And then other than that, feel free to experiment and go crazy. So, you know, again, if you're in C major, pretty much all the white keys are fair play. So you can go into your MIDI roll and you can just any white key go nuts with. It doesn't really matter. You can kind of do whatever you want. We can swap stuff around. And let's see what we get now. That's what I'm saying. Everything's going to have a little bit different emotive feel. Everything's going to have a little bit of a different flavor. And once you have kind of built that up, now you've got something that feels a little bit more interesting. So if you don't have a lot of music theory, give yourself time to kind of play around with things. And if you can find a tool that's going to tell you exactly what notes you're playing, that will kind of help you start to accidentally piece together that theory as you try stuff and experiment and have your trial and error kind of built into your workflow. So hopefully this helped you kind of extend some of those basic chords and come up with something a little bit more unique. And there you have it. There are some of my favorite tips, tricks, and techniques that I like to use to spice up something like a boring chord progression. I don't have a ton of music theory knowledge. I have barely a little bit, and I mostly picked that up from just kind of watching different videos online. There are a ton of good channels that are just like purely devoted to music theory. So if you're trying to get your kind of basis for that, go check those out. We also have a music theory course on our website that is taught by Christopher CU. He has an amazing YouTube channel where he talks about theory and structure and things like that. But if you want something a little bit more in depth, you can head over to makepopmusic.com and check that out. Also, if you want to head over there, we have tons of other sample packs, preset packs, courses, blog posts. We just started a podcast, so we've got a few episodes of that. So that can help support the channel. And then other than that, if you like the video, please make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Let us know what videos you want to see in the comments down below, and we'll kind of pull those and see what we can do with that. But with all that said, I hope this video helped you. Please let us know if you like this video. Other than that, that's going to do it for this video. We'll see you guys next week. Much love. Peace.